Something hidden lies buried in America's past. Picture that crystal orb at the center of New York, watched by millions of eyes each year. That glittering ball in Times Square, slowly descending at midnight, carries with it a nation's hopes and fears. But the roots of this tradition run darker and more complex than most imagine. On a frigid winter night in 1620, as Pilgrims first set foot on Massachusetts shores, they carried with them the only calendar they knew, the Julian calendar that began in March. For them, the new year didn't start in January as we know it, but with spring's arrival in March. The colonists, walking across ice-covered ground, remained determined to maintain the old world's customs. In those first winter evenings at Plymouth, words still remain in Governor William Bradford's diary. On December 25, 1620, colonists began building their first house. Bradford wrote that this day held no special meaning, merely another day requiring work for survival. The following year, when some newcomers wished to celebrate Christmas, Bradford excused them from work, but forbade games in the streets. This marked one of America's first restrictions, laying groundwork for future New Year's celebrations. Yet what proves most intriguing is the different approach in the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam. On Manhattan Island, Dutch settlers continued their Sinterklaas tradition. Every December 6th, children placed their shoes beside the fireplace and found gifts in the morning. This tradition would, in ways no one could foresee, eventually center American Christmas and New Year celebrations centuries later. A great change arrived in 1752. British colonies finally switched from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar. During this transition, 11 days vanished from history. People slept on the night of September 2nd and awoke on the morning of September 14th. In New York taverns, arguments about these lost days continued through the night. Some worried about paying rent short. Others wondered if they had aged during this time. With this change, the New Year began to be celebrated on January 1st. But these celebrations differed from today's. Puritan influence remained strong in New England. In Boston, New Year's was merely a day of silent prayer and reflection. Celebrating, drinking, playing music was forbidden. Streets remained dim and quiet. But New York proved different. Dutch tradition continued living even under British rule. In New Amsterdam's streets, a tradition called calling began on New Year's Eve. Men would visit every house in the city in turn, kissing ladies' hands, drinking punch, and offering good wishes. This tradition lasted all day, ending with drunk men swaying home in the evening. In Philadelphia, Quaker influence dominated. New Year's celebration was nearly non-existent. Only families quietly welcomed the New Year at home. Drinking, dancing, speaking loudly was frowned upon. Streets remained calm as if nothing was happening. Virginia proved vastly different. Southern plantation owners maintained English aristocratic traditions. In grand mansions, magnificent balls were held on New Year's nights. Under crystal chandeliers, silk-dressed women and tail-coated men danced. In mansions stretching along the James River, warm punch bubbled in cauldrons beside fireplaces. But these celebrations had another side rarely told in history books. On Virginia plantations, slave owners granted slaves special permissions on New Year's Eve. These nights, normal hierarchy temporarily reversed. Slave quarters echoed with song and dance. African-rooted rituals mixed with Christian prayers. Banjo strings vibrated, feet struck the earth. Within these traditions, a seed was sprouting that no one yet noticed. People from different cultures began creating something new in the New World. St. Nicholas from Holland, wassailing traditions from England, music and dance from Africa, Native American winter solstice ceremonies, all slowly began merging. In 1789, the newly established United States First Congress convened on December 25th. This alone shows how little New Year's was yet valued. New England businesses opened on Christmas. Schools took no holiday. Children still sat at their desks on New Year's morning. However, something began changing in the early 19th century. In 1807, Washington Irving wrote Knickerbocker's History of New York. In this book, he romanticized New York's old Dutch days. He portrayed St. Nicholas as a fat, jolly figure descending through chimneys. This portrayal began capturing the American public imagination. Irving's writings also described old New Year traditions. How New Year's calling was done in Dutch times, how they were received at different houses, what drinks were served. This nostalgic narrative created in readers a desire to revive lost traditions. Another change came in 1823. Clement Clarke Moore wrote the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas. Beginning, "'Twas the night before Christmas," this poem fully formed the Santa Claus image. But this poem's real impact was transforming Christmas into a family-centered celebration. And family-centered Christmas naturally led to family-centered New Year's. Meanwhile, in New York, a different development was occurring. The city's heart, known as Longacre Square, became the center of newspapers, theaters, and hotels. In 1851, the New York Times opened its new building here. Owner Adolph Ochs renamed the area Times Square. Ochs had in mind making this square New York's celebration center. First, he organized fireworks displays from atop the building. 1903, 1904, 1905, 1906. Each year bigger, more magnificent. But in 1907, city administration banned fireworks. Fire danger was too great. Ochs sought alternatives. He then remembered seeing the time ball tradition at Greenwich's Royal Observatory. Every day at 1 p.m., a large ball descended from atop a pole. This showed ships the exact time. Ochs thought, why not do the same for New Year's? He commissioned Jacob's Star, a young metalworker. A ball 5 feet in diameter, weighing 700 pounds, equipped with 125-watt bulbs. Interior wood, exterior iron. Simple, but spectacular. On the evening of December 31st, 1907, crowds gathered in Times Square. No one knew exactly what would happen. At 11:59, 6 men hoisted the ball atop the pole using rope. At exactly midnight, they began slowly lowering it. 200,000 people watched breathlessly. When the ball touched ground, a roar erupted. Whistles, shouts, applause. Nothing like this had ever been seen in New York. People hugged, kissed, sang. That night, Times Square instantly became all America's New Year center. But this tradition brought unexpected challenges, too. In 1942 and 1943, blackouts were enforced in the city due to World War II. German submarines roamed the Atlantic. Lights might attract enemy ships. Those years, the ball didn't drop. Instead, church bells marked the new year. Crowds observed a minute of silence. The ball returned in 1944. But it was different now. War had changed Americans. Celebrations that were once more intimate, more local, now gained national identity. Through radio broadcasts, the entire country listened to Times Square. From California to Texas, Florida to Minnesota, everyone experienced this moment simultaneously. Here, something unexpected happened. Other cities began their own ball drop traditions. In Atlanta, Miami, Chicago. But none achieved the popularity of New York's. Times Square remained the heart of American New Year's. The psychology underlying this tradition is also noteworthy. Americans experience collective catharsis at New Year's. All problems, disappointments, losses of the past year symbolically fall with that ball. The new year brings new beginnings, new hopes. This is a very powerful ritual. This ritual's power is so great that as technology changes, it adapts itself. Radio came in the 1920s. The ball was announced on radio. Television came in the 1950s. The ball was watched on TV. The Internet came in the 1990s. The ball was streamed online. Each technology strengthened this tradition. However, the tradition's social dynamics also changed. The 1907 crowd was mostly white, middle-class men. Families began coming in the 1950s. Different ethnic groups participated in the 1970s. International tourists flocked in the 1990s. Each group experienced this tradition by blending it with their own culture. Amid these changes, one thing remained constant: the excitement at that crystal ball's moment of descent. The hopeful expression appearing on people's faces. The collective experience of feeling, this time will be different. Perhaps this is America's most democratic moment. Rich and poor, young and old, people of every background feel the same thing. And so, the story that began on a cold winter night on Massachusetts shores continued with a glittering orb in Manhattan's heart. But the real story doesn't end here, because there are still untold secrets, hidden parties, forbidden drinks, and social transformations that deeply changed the American spirit. On a cold winter night in 1620, as the Pilgrims who came ashore on the coasts of Massachusetts spent their first winters in the New World, the only calendar they brought with them was the Julian calendar that began in March. For them, the new year did not begin at the start of January as we know it, but began in March with the arrival of spring. The colonists, walking over ice-covered ground, were determined to keep the habits of the Old World alive. In those first winter nights in Plymouth, the lines Governor William Bradford wrote in his diary still remain. On December 25, 1620, the colonists began building their first house. Bradford wrote that this day had no special meaning, only that it was a day that had to be worked in order to survive. The next year, when some newcomers wanted to celebrate Christmas, Bradford excused them from work, but did not allow them to play games in the street. This was one of the first restrictions that laid the foundation for America's future New Year celebrations. But what is truly interesting is the different approach of the Dutch colony in New Amsterdam. On the island of Manhattan, Dutch settlers continued the Sinterklaas tradition. Every December 6th, children placed their shoes beside the fireplace and found gifts in the morning. This tradition, in a way no one could yet foresee, would centuries later sit at the center of American Christmas and New Year celebrations. In 1752, a great change arrived. The English colonies finally moved from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. During this transition, 11 days disappeared from history. People went to sleep on the night of September 2nd and woke up on the morning of September 14th. In New York taverns, arguments about these lost days lasted through the night. Some worried they would pay their rent short. Others wondered whether they had grown older during that time. With this change, the New Year began to be celebrated on January 1st. But these celebrations were not like today's. In New England, Puritan influence was still strong. In Boston, New Year's was only a day of silent prayer and contemplation. Celebrating, drinking alcohol, playing music were forbidden. The streets were dim and quiet. But in New York, the situation was different. Dutch tradition continued to live even under English rule. In the streets of New Amsterdam, a tradition called calling began on New Year's Eve. Men visited every house in the city in order, kissed ladies' hands, drank punch, and offered good wishes. This tradition lasted all day, and by evening, scenes appeared of drunk men swaying as they made their way home. In Philadelphia, Quaker influence dominated. New Year's celebration was almost non-existent. Only families quietly welcomed the New Year at home. Drinking alcohol, dancing, speaking loudly were not welcomed. The streets were calm, as if nothing were happening. In Virginia, the situation was very different. Southern plantation owners maintained the traditions of English aristocracy. In large mansions, magnificent balls were held on New Year's nights. Under crystal chandeliers, women in silk dresses and men in tailcoats danced. In mansions stretching along the James River, warm punch bubbled in cauldrons beside the fireplaces. But there was another side to these celebrations that is rarely told in history books. On Virginia plantations, slave owners gave enslaved people special permissions on New Year's Eve. On these nights, the normal hierarchy was temporarily reversed. The slave quarters echoed with the sounds of song and dance. African-rooted rituals mixed with Christian prayers. Banjo strings trembled, feet struck the earth. Within these traditions, it would be understood that a seed was sprouting that no one had yet noticed. People from different cultures began to create something new in the New World. St. Nicholas from Holland, the wassailing tradition from England, music and dance from Africa, Native American winter solstice ceremonies. All of them began to blend slowly. In 1789, the first Congress of the newly established United States met on December 25th. Even this shows how little New Year's was valued yet. Businesses in New England were open on Christmas. Schools did not take a holiday. Children sat at their desks even on New Year's morning. However, at the beginning of the 19th century, some things began to change. In 1807, Washington Irving wrote Knickerbocker's History of New York. In this book, he romanticized New York's old Dutch days. He described St. Nicholas as a chubby, cheerful figure who came down through chimneys. This portrayal began to take hold in the imagination of the American public. In Irving's writings, he also describes the old New Year traditions. In Dutch times, how New Year's calling was done, how they were received in different homes, what drinks were served. This nostalgic narrative created in readers a desire to revive a tradition that had been lost. In 1823, another change came. Clement Clarke Moore wrote the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas. Beginning with "'Twas the night before Christmas," this poem fully created the Santa Claus image. But the real impact of this poem was transforming Christmas into a family-centered celebration. And a family-centered Christmas naturally led to a family-centered New Year's. Here, something unexpected happens. Other cities begin their own ball drop traditions. in Atlanta, Miami, Chicago, but none achieved the popularity of New York's. Times Square remains the heart of American New Year's. The psychology underlying this tradition is also noteworthy. Americans experience collective catharsis at New Year's. All problems, disappointments, losses of the past year symbolically fall with that ball. The new year brings new beginnings, new hopes. This is a very powerful ritual. The power of this ritual becomes so great that it adapts itself as technology changes. Radio arrives in the 1920s. The ball is announced on radio. Television comes in the 1950s. The ball is watched on TV. The Internet arrives in the 1990s. The ball is streamed online. Each technology strengthens this tradition. However, the tradition's social dynamics also change. The 1907 crowd is mostly white, middle-class men. Families begin coming in the 1950s. Different ethnic groups participate in the 1970s. International tourists flocked in the 1990s. Each group experiences this tradition by blending it with their own culture. Amid these changes, one thing remains constant: the excitement at that crystal ball's moment of descent, the hopeful expression appearing on people's faces, the collective experience of feeling, "This time will be different." Perhaps this is America's most democratic moment. Rich and poor, young and old, people of every background feel the same thing. The theological debates that rage in colonial communities about celebration reveal deep philosophical divisions that will shape American religious culture for centuries. Puritan ministers preach that any observance not explicitly commanded in Scripture constitutes dangerous innovation. They argue that December 25th lacks biblical authority, that revelry corrupts moral character, and that celebration distracts from spiritual devotion. Yet even within Puritan communities, private observance continues, creating tension between public doctrine and personal practice. The Dutch Reformed Church in New Amsterdam takes a markedly different approach, viewing celebration as expression of gratitude for divine providence. Their theological framework embraces joy, community gathering, and moderate festivity as appropriate responses to God's blessings. This perspective influences how Dutch families observe both Christmas and New Year, creating traditions that emphasize Thanksgiving rather than revelry. Anglican communities in Virginia and the Carolinas maintain strong connections to English customs, viewing celebration as expression of cultural continuity and social hierarchy. Their observances include elaborate church services, formal dinners, and organized entertainment that reinforces existing social structures. The plantation system provides economic foundation for lavish celebrations that demonstrate wealth and status. Economic factors play crucial roles in shaping colonial celebration patterns. Prosperous merchants in Philadelphia and New York can afford imported goods for festivities. Wines from Madeira, spices from the Caribbean, textiles from Europe. These luxury items become symbols of sophisticated celebration that distinguish elite families from common laborers. The developing consumer culture begins associating celebration quality with purchasing power. Regional climate differences affect how celebrations develop across different colonial areas. New England's harsh winters force indoor gathering and emphasize warmth, light, and preserved foods. Southern climates allow outdoor festivities and fresh ingredients that create different celebration atmospheres. These geographic influences establish regional celebration traditions that persist for generations. The role of women in colonial celebrations varies dramatically across different communities and social classes. Puritan women face restrictions on public participation, but often organize private family observances. Dutch women enjoy greater freedom to participate in community festivities and maintain cultural traditions. Plantation mistresses orchestrate elaborate entertainment, but depend on enslaved labor for preparation and service. Native American interactions with European celebration practices create complex cultural exchanges that influence emerging American traditions. Some indigenous communities adopt Christian observances while maintaining traditional seasonal ceremonies. Others resist European influences while sharing their own celebration customs with sympathetic colonists. These cross-cultural encounters plant seeds for the multicultural celebration traditions that will characterize later American society. The legal frameworks governing celebration evolve as colonial governments balance religious requirements, community peace, and economic interests. Massachusetts Bay Colony's formal prohibition of Christmas celebration represents extreme regulatory approach that proves difficult to enforce. Other colonies develop more flexible policies that allow private observance while restricting public disruption. Transportation limitations profoundly affect how colonial families maintain celebration traditions. Difficult travel during winter months means that extended family gatherings require substantial planning and preparation. When families do manage to gather, celebrations become especially meaningful as rare opportunities for community connection. These challenges make celebration more precious and memorable. The printing industry's development enables wider distribution of celebration materials, including prayer books, song collections, and instructional guides. Colonial printers begin producing materials specifically designed for American audiences rather than simply importing European publications. This emerging American publishing industry helps standardize celebration practices across different regions and communities. And so, the story that began on a cold winter night on Massachusetts shores continues with a glittering orb in Manhattan's heart. But the real story doesn't end here, because there are still untold secrets, hidden parties, forbidden drinks, and social transformations that deeply changed the American spirit. January 16, 1920, midnight. A great silence begins across America. The Volstead Act takes effect, and alcohol becomes prohibited in every corner of the nation. But the crowd in Times Square doesn't even realize what's happening. On New Year's Eve, 1920, people still celebrate. No one yet suspects what will truly unfold. In the first days, prohibitionists believe they've achieved victory. In Boston, Chicago, Detroit, alcohol sales cease. Bars close, taverns empty. But this is only what happens on the surface. In reality, a very different world begins shaping underground. In New York, the first speakeasies open in summer 1920. Initially, they're simple places. In basements, behind hidden doors, drinks are quietly served. Passwords are required. Sometimes just knocking on a specific door in a specific way suffices. Codes like bee's knees and cat's pajamas are used. But as New Year approaches, these secret venues take on a different atmosphere. On the last night of 1920, hidden parties are organized in every street of Manhattan. Behind dark curtains, champagne bottles pop. Jazz music plays. Young women dance, defying prohibition. This night, there's a special party at Texas Guinan's El Fay Club. The entrance is upstairs, leading to a door with a peephole. Inside, silk walls seat about 80 patrons, with a small stage for chorus girls. Texas herself greets customers with her famous line, "Hello, suckers." She promises the crowd a fight a night or your money back. Among the guests are celebrities of the day: Babe Ruth, Charles Chaplin, Rudolph Valentino. They sip cocktails whose very existence defies federal law. The drinks taste different from what people remember. Bootleg liquor is harsh, burning the throat. Bartenders mask the rough taste with new cocktails: sidecars, gin fizzes, bees' knees made with honey to hide bad gin's bite. Young George Raft tap dances on stage, while a 14-year-old Ruby Keeler performs in the chorus line. The energy is electric, dangerous, intoxicating beyond just the illegal alcohol. These people know they're breaking the law, and that knowledge adds excitement to everything. By midnight, as 1921 approaches, Texas leads everyone in song. But suddenly, a sharp whistle pierces the music. "Cheese it! The cops!" someone shouts. Within seconds, drinks disappear behind false walls, musicians hide their instruments, and patrons transform into innocent dinner guests. Police storm in to find nothing but a quiet restaurant serving coffee and sandwiches. This cat-and-mouse game defines Prohibition-era New Year's celebrations. Every year from 1920 to 1933, Americans develop increasingly elaborate ways to celebrate, despite the law. In Chicago, Al Capone throws lavish New Year's parties in the Lexington Hotel. His private elevator leads to a hidden ballroom where politicians, judges, and police captains toast the new year with the finest whiskey money can buy. The parties aren't just in big cities. Small-town America creates its own traditions. In rural areas, farmers distill moonshine in hidden stills deep in forests. On New Year's Eve, entire communities gather in barns decorated with corn stalks and winter flowers. Mason jars filled with clear liquid pass from hand to hand as folks dance to fiddle music until dawn. But perhaps the most significant change is who's participating. Before Prohibition, drinking was primarily a male activity. Saloons excluded women. But speakeasies welcome everyone. For the first time, respectable women sit at bars, order drinks, and join the party. The hip flask becomes a symbol of rebellion, hidden in fur muffs and beaded purses. Young women called flappers embody this new freedom. They wear short skirts, smoke cigarettes, and dance the Charleston with wild abandon. At New Year's parties, they shock their elders by drinking gin rickeys and staying out until sunrise. Their bobbed hair swings as they move to syncopated rhythms that would have been scandalous just years before. The music itself tells the story. Jazz, born in New Orleans brothels and honky-tonks, becomes the soundtrack of rebellion. At Prohibition parties, Duke Ellington's orchestra plays Mood Indigo, while couples dance cheek to cheek on cramped floors. The music's syncopated rhythms match the era's defiant spirit. Offbeat, unexpected, alive with possibility. Underground venues multiply exponentially. By the late 1920s, New York has an estimated 32,000 speakeasies, more than the number of legal saloons before Prohibition. Some are elegant affairs. The Cotton Club in Harlem, where white society listens to black musicians in a segregated setting that epitomizes the era's contradictions. Others are simple, blind pigs, where workers gather after long shifts to forget their troubles in cheap bathtub gin. The transformation affects more than just drinking habits. Organized crime flourishes as gangs fight for territory and supply chains. Violence erupts between rival bootleggers, but somehow New Year's Eve remains sacred. Even Chicago's most notorious gangsters observe a temporary truce on this night, as if the hope for a better year transcends their bloody conflicts. The economics of celebration change too. Before Prohibition, a working man might spend a nickel for a beer. Now cocktails cost 50 cents or more, a day's wages for many. This transforms New Year's from a populist celebration to something more exclusive, at least in fashionable speakeasies. Yet people find ways to celebrate regardless. House parties become common, with guests contributing bootleg bottles to a communal punch bowl. Women play crucial roles in this underground economy. Some, like Belle Livingstone, open elegant clubs for society's elite. Her country club features an indoor miniature golf course and attracts celebrities alongside gangsters. During a famous raid, she tries escaping to the roof while dressed in red pajamas. Mary Texas Guinan becomes the most famous hostess, moving from club to club after police raids, always ready with a quip and a warm welcome for suckers who pay her cover charges. The speakeasy atmosphere is thick with more than just tobacco smoke. In these permissive environments, many Americans encounter drugs for the first time. Marijuana, cocaine, and narcotics circulate at parties where normal social rules don't apply. The combination of illegal alcohol, jazz music, and recreational drugs creates a heady mixture that transforms how Americans think about pleasure and rebellion. Radio broadcasts add a new dimension to New Year's celebrations. Families who can't afford speakeasy prices gather around crystal sets to hear Guy Lombardo's sweetest music this side of heaven from the Roosevelt Hotel. The contrast is striking. Respectable families listening to proper dance music, while just blocks away, wild parties rage behind hidden doors. The hypocrisy reaches into government itself. Politicians who vote for Prohibition often attend the wildest parties. On New Year's Eve 1925, a federal judge is spotted dancing with a known bootlegger's wife while Prohibition agents raid a speakeasy 3 blocks away. The law becomes a joke that everyone understands but no one admits. As the decade progresses, celebrations grow more elaborate and desperate. The 1929 New Year's Eve, just months after the stock market crash, sees some of the wildest parties yet. People sense that an era is ending, that the good times can't last forever. In speakeasies from New York to San Francisco, revelers drink as if trying to wash away the future. Children of this era grow up with a different relationship to authority and rules. They see their parents openly breaking federal law and thriving. This shapes their understanding of government, morality, and personal freedom in ways that will influence American culture for generations. The midnight countdown itself takes on new meaning during Prohibition. As 1932 approaches 1933, many know that Prohibition's days are numbered. Franklin Roosevelt has promised repeal. The countdown feels like more than just marking time. It's counting down to the end of America's noble experiment. Yet something unexpected emerges from these 13 years of hidden celebrations. Americans develop a taste for cocktails that will outlast Prohibition. The tradition of elaborate New Year's parties becomes embedded in the culture. Most importantly, the idea that celebration itself is a form of rebellion, a way to assert personal freedom against oppressive authority, becomes part of the American character. When Prohibition finally ends on December 5, 1933, the celebration culture it created doesn't disappear. Instead, it goes legitimate. The speakeasy aesthetic, intimate lighting, live music, craft cocktails, influences how Americans party for decades to come. New Year's Eve 1933 sees both the last illegal toasts and the first legal ones in 13 years, bridging one era to the next. The cultural impact of Prohibition on New Year's celebrations extends far beyond drinking habits. The era fundamentally reshapes American attitudes toward authority, social conformity, and personal freedom. Children growing up during these years develop a complex relationship with rules and regulations, seeing their parents openly flout federal law while maintaining respectability in other areas of life. Regional differences in enforcement create a patchwork of celebration cultures across the country. Atlantic City becomes a notorious haven where Prohibition is essentially ignored. City boss Enoch "Nucky" Johnson controls everything from smuggling operations to law enforcement, creating a wide-open environment where tourists flock for uninhibited New Year's festivities. The resort's beachfront location allows rum runners to bring goods directly ashore, while corrupt officials look the other way. In rural areas, the speakeasy phenomenon takes different forms. Small towns develop networks of hidden stills and informal gathering places. Farmers convert barns into temporary dance halls for New Year's celebrations. Community members, who might never have considered breaking the law, find themselves participating in illegal activities that feel like harmless fun. The distinction between law-abiding citizens and criminals becomes blurred in ways that permanently alter American concepts of civic duty. The economics of illegal celebration create new social hierarchies. Those with connections to bootleggers gain social status previously unavailable. Women who run successful speakeasies become powerful figures in their communities, exercising influence that would have been impossible in legitimate business. The underground economy provides opportunities for advancement to groups traditionally excluded from mainstream commerce. Corruption permeates every level of society. Police officials who raid speakeasies often drink at different establishments the same night. Federal agents accept bribes while publicly denouncing lawlessness. Politicians vote for stricter enforcement while privately attending the most exclusive illegal parties. This hypocrisy becomes so normalized that it shapes American cynicism about government and authority for generations. The international dimension of Prohibition affects New Year's celebrations in unexpected ways. Canadian and Mexican borders become conduits for smuggling operations that supply American parties. Ships from Britain and France hover outside territorial waters, waiting to transfer cargo to fast boats that race toward shore under cover of darkness. New Year's Eve 1925 sees Coast Guard vessels pursuing rum runners through ice-filled harbors while parties rage on nearby shores. Professional entertainment evolves to serve the speakeasy market. Musicians develop new performance styles suited to small, intimate venues rather than large concert halls. Singers learn to project emotion without overwhelming volume, creating the crooning style that will dominate popular music for decades. Dancers adapt choreography to cramped floors where couples move in close formation. The technological aspects of the illegal liquor trade become increasingly sophisticated. Hidden panels, secret passages, and elaborate signal systems protect valuable inventory from law enforcement raids. Some speakeasies install multiple escape routes and emergency communication networks that rival military installations. The ingenuity required to operate these businesses fosters innovation that extends into other areas of American enterprise. International connections forged during Prohibition create lasting cultural exchanges. British bartenders bring cocktail recipes that survive long after the laws change. French chefs working in elegant speakeasies introduce sophisticated cuisine to American palates. Italian wine merchants establish distribution networks that evolve into legitimate businesses after repeal. The role of women in Prohibition-era celebrations represents a massive social transformation. Before 1920, respectable women rarely consumed alcohol in public settings. Speakeasies break down these barriers, creating environments where men and women drink and socialize as equals. This gender integration has profound implications for marriage, family structure, and women's rights movements. Youth culture emerges during Prohibition in ways that permanently alter American society. Teenagers and young adults embrace rebellion against parental authority and government control. College students organize elaborate schemes to obtain alcohol for parties. High school students learn that popular kids are those with access to forbidden pleasures. These experiences shape generational attitudes that persist long after Prohibition ends. Religious communities split over Prohibition in ways that reveal deep theological and cultural divisions. Some denominations strongly support the law as moral necessity, while others question government interference in personal choices. These debates fragment congregations and create new alliances that cross traditional denominational boundaries. The health implications of Prohibition become apparent as the decade progresses. Bootleg alcohol often contains dangerous additives that cause blindness, paralysis, and death. New Year's celebrations sometimes end in hospital emergency rooms or morgues. Yet these risks seem to increase rather than decrease the appeal of illegal drinking, as danger adds excitement to transgression. Labor unions become involved in speakeasy operations as workers seek additional income during economic downturns. Brewery workers maintain their skills by operating illegal facilities. Truckers supplement wages by transporting contraband liquor. Construction workers build hidden compartments and secret rooms. The illegal alcohol trade provides employment for thousands of Americans during uncertain economic times. Law enforcement develops increasingly aggressive tactics to combat speakeasy operations. Federal agents use wiretapping, undercover infiltration, and violent raids that sometimes result in civilian casualties. The militarization of domestic law enforcement during Prohibition establishes precedents that influence police tactics for decades afterward. The impact on family life varies dramatically across social classes and geographic regions. Wealthy families often maintain private stock hidden in elaborate home bars, allowing them to continue entertaining in familiar style. Middle-class families struggle with competing desires to respect the law and participate in social celebrations. Working-class families face the greatest risks from both dangerous bootleg alcohol and aggressive law enforcement. As the end of Prohibition approaches, anticipation builds for the return of legal celebration. New Year's Eve, 1932, features unprecedented crowds in Times Square as people sense that dramatic change is coming. Franklin Roosevelt's election promises repeal, creating an atmosphere of expectation that makes this countdown particularly significant. The final New Year's Eve of Prohibition, December 31st, 1933, becomes a nationwide celebration of impending freedom. By this date, many states have already moved to legalize beer and wine, but federal prohibition remains technically in force. Crowds gather in speakeasies for what they know will be the last illegal New Year's celebration in American history. But as Americans toast their newfound freedom, they don't yet know that an even greater transformation awaits. A young band leader from Canada is about to change how the entire nation celebrates, creating a tradition that will last nearly 50 years and define what it means to ring in the new year as one people, under the glow of radio waves stretching from coast to coast. The aftermath of Prohibition brings unexpected consequences for American celebration culture. The sophisticated cocktail knowledge developed during the illegal years doesn't disappear with repeal. Instead, it becomes part of mainstream entertaining culture, influencing how Americans host parties and socialize for generations. The intimate, underground aesthetic of speakeasies evolves into the cocktail lounge and nightclub culture that defines mid-20th century urban entertainment. Law enforcement techniques developed during Prohibition continue influencing police methods long after the laws change. Surveillance technologies, undercover operations, and federal-local cooperation models established during the 1920s become standard practices applied to other social problems. The expansion of federal law enforcement capabilities during Prohibition creates institutional frameworks that persist throughout American history. The role of organized crime in American society fundamentally changes during Prohibition, creating power structures and economic networks that extend far beyond alcohol distribution. Crime syndicates that emerge during the 1920s diversify into gambling, labor racketeering, and other illegal enterprises that continue operating after liquor becomes legal. The cultural romanticization of gangsters during Prohibition influences American popular culture for decades. International relationships formed during Prohibition affect American foreign policy and trade relationships throughout the 20th century. Canadian and Caribbean suppliers who established networks during the illegal period become important trading partners in legitimate commerce. The diplomatic tensions created by liquor smuggling operations influence how America negotiates treaties and manages border security. The transformation of American women's social roles during Prohibition proves more lasting than the alcohol laws themselves. Women who gain independence and public presence in speakeasies continue demanding equality in other areas of society. The fashion, behavior, and attitude changes associated with the flapper era become permanent features of American culture rather than temporary rebellion against traditional constraints. Musical innovations that emerge from Prohibition-era clubs continue influencing American popular culture long after the venues close. Jazz performance techniques developed for intimate speakeasy settings affect how musicians approach recording and radio performance. The blending of different musical traditions that occurs in integrated Prohibition venues helps create uniquely American musical forms that gain worldwide influence. Economic patterns established during Prohibition affect how Americans think about regulation, taxation, and government authority in business matters. The failure of alcohol prohibition influences debates about drug laws, gambling regulation, and other moral legislation throughout American history. The economic arguments against prohibition become templates for opposing other forms of social regulation. The technological innovations required for successful bootlegging operations contribute to advances in transportation, communication, and industrial organization that benefit legitimate businesses after repeal. Radio networks, refrigeration systems, and distribution methods developed for illegal liquor trade become models for other industries. The entrepreneurial energy channeled into prohibition evasion gets redirected toward legal business innovation. Regional differences in prohibition enforcement create lasting cultural variations in American drinking and celebration practices. Areas with strict enforcement develop different attitudes toward authority and social conformity than regions where laws are ignored. These regional cultural differences influence American political and social development for generations after Prohibition ends. But as Americans toast their newfound freedom, they don't yet know that an even greater transformation awaits. A young band leader from Canada is about to change how the entire nation celebrates. creating a tradition that will last nearly 50 years and define what it means to ring in the new year as one people under the glow of radio waves stretching from coast to coast. December 31st, 1928. In a Chicago hotel ballroom, something magical is about to happen. Guy Lombardo adjusts his bow tie and taps his baton against his music stand. The young Canadian band leader has no idea that tonight will change how America celebrates New Year's Eve forever. Behind him, his Royal Canadians Orchestra prepares their instruments, the saxophone section gleaming under ballroom lights. At radio station WBBM, engineers check their equipment one final time. This is still early days for radio broadcasting. Crystal sets crackle with static, and reaching audiences beyond a few hundred miles remains uncertain. But tonight, something in the air feels different. The music about to emerge from that ballroom will travel farther than anyone imagines. Guy was born Gaetano Alberto Lombardo in London, Ontario, in 1902. His father, a tailor with a beautiful baritone voice, encouraged all his sons to pursue music. Guy learned violin but frustrated his father by refusing to play classical pieces exactly as written. He added his own touches, slowed down tempos, smoothed out harsh edges. His father once smashed Guy's violin in anger, but the boy's musical instincts proved unstoppable. The Lombardo brothers formed their band in 1924, billing themselves as playing the sweetest music this side of heaven. Critics called them corny, too sentimental, lacking the raw energy of authentic jazz. But audiences loved what they heard. There was something comforting about Lombardo's sound, something that made people want to dance close together, to hold each other tight. When the band moved to Chicago in 1927, they initially played to empty houses at the Granada Cafe. Desperate for attention, Guy convinced the local radio station to broadcast their shows. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Phones at the station rang constantly, and crowds packed the club. Radio had found its perfect dance band. That New Year's Eve, 1928, as Guy raises his baton for the first song, families across the Midwest gather around their radio sets. In Kansas farmhouses and Detroit factories, in Minnesota timber camps and Illinois small towns, people tune in to hear this new kind of celebration. They don't know it yet, but they're about to become part of the largest New Year's party in history. The music begins, sweet, smooth, romantic. Guy's unique sound emerges from his saxophone section's exaggerated vibrato, his brass section's clipped phrases, and his emphasis on melody over rhythm. It's music for dancing, for dreaming, for forgetting troubles and believing in better times ahead. But the real magic happens at midnight. As 1929 approaches, Guy leads the band in a song he learned back home in Canada, where Scottish immigrants had sung it for generations. Auld Lang Syne had been popular at New Year's celebrations for decades, but Guy's arrangement transforms it into something transcendent. The melody flows like honey, each note lingering in the air before the next one arrives. Across America, people listening to their radios spontaneously begin singing along. In living rooms from coast to coast, families link arms and sway to the music. The song's ancient Scottish words about remembering old friends and times past suddenly feel perfectly suited to this moment of transition from one year to the next. The broadcast is such a success that CBS convinces Guy to move to New York. In 1929, he establishes the band at the Roosevelt Hotel's elegant Roosevelt Grill. The venue becomes America's unofficial New Year's headquarters, with radio broadcasts carried coast to coast. Something unprecedented is happening. For the first time, the entire nation can celebrate together at exactly the same moment. The early broadcasts create their own rituals and traditions. Guy develops his signature banter with the audience, his warm Canadian accent making listeners feel like welcomed guests at an elegant party. He introduces songs with personal stories, talks about the weather, mentions letters from fans. The intimacy of radio transforms a hotel ballroom into every American living room. In 1929, something remarkable occurs. 2 radio networks want Guy's New Year's show. He signs with CBS to broadcast before midnight and NBC to broadcast after. To bridge the gap during the actual countdown, he plays Auld Lang Syne. This positioning makes the song inseparable from New Year's Eve in American minds. Guy doesn't realize it, but he's creating what will become the most recognized New Year's moment in the world. The Roosevelt Grill becomes a magical place during these broadcasts. Society figures, celebrities, and ordinary people lucky enough to get tickets dance beneath crystal chandeliers while radio waves carry their celebration across the continent. Women wear long evening gowns and white gloves. Men sport tailcoats and top hats. It's elegant, sophisticated, and somehow accessible to everyone listening at home. But Guy's success isn't just about music or atmosphere. He understands something profound about American psychology during the Depression years. People need hope, comfort, something beautiful to believe in. His Sweetest Music This Side of Heaven provides emotional sanctuary during harsh times. The broadcasts continue through the 1930s, growing in popularity each year. By the late 30s, it's estimated that over 100 million Americans tune in to Guy's New Year's show, nearly the entire radio-owning population. Variety magazine calls him the only Canadian ever to create an American tradition. World War II brings changes, but doesn't interrupt the tradition. In 1942 and 1943, when Times Square goes dark due to wartime blackouts, Guy's music provides continuity. Families gather around radios to hear familiar melodies while their sons and fathers serve overseas. The music connects home front to battlefront, providing shared experience across an enormous geography of war. Military personnel stationed around the world tune in whenever possible. In Pacific Islands and European camps, American servicemen listen to shortwave broadcasts of Guy's show, the familiar sounds of home carrying across oceans. Letters pour into the Roosevelt Hotel from soldiers describing how Auld Lang Syne made them cry with homesickness and hope. The post-war years bring television, but rather than diminishing Guy's influence, the visual element enhances it. The first televised broadcast in 1954 draws 1.5 million viewers. Audiences can now see the elegant ballroom, the well-dressed dancers, Guy's gentle smile as he conducts his musicians. The visual component makes the celebration feel even more inclusive and democratic. Television broadcasts reveal details that radio couldn't convey. The careful choreography of waiters serving champagne, the way light catches on women's jewelry, the mixture of excitement and reverence on faces as midnight approaches. These images define what sophisticated New Year's celebration should look like for generations of Americans. Guy's personal warmth becomes legendary. He receives thousands of letters each year from fans sharing their New Year's memories, and he responds personally to many. Children write asking him to play their favorite songs. Elderly people thank him for providing soundtrack to their golden years. Young couples credit his music with bringing them together. Presidents regularly call Guy on New Year's Eve to wish him well. From Franklin Roosevelt to Jimmy Carter, America's leaders understand that Guy Lombardo represents something important about national unity and shared values. His broadcast becomes as much a part of presidential tradition as the State of the Union address. The consistency of Guy's presence provides comfort during turbulent times. Through the Depression, World War II, the Cold War, Vietnam, Watergate, his music remains constant. Each December 31st, Americans know exactly where to find him and what to expect. In a rapidly changing world, Guy Lombardo's New Year's broadcast becomes a fixed star by which people navigate. His musicians develop into family over the decades. Many band members stay for 20 or 30 years, creating musical chemistry that deepens with time. Guy's brothers Carmen, Lieber, and Victor remain core members throughout their careers. This stability translates into musical telepathy that audiences feel even through radio waves. The song selection evolves gradually, but Auld Lang Syne remains sacred. Guy's arrangement becomes the definitive version, copied by orchestras worldwide. When other band leaders attempt the song, audiences compare them to Guy's standard. He owns this musical moment completely. By the 1970s, musical tastes are changing. Younger audiences prefer rock and roll to big band music. Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve begins competing for viewers, offering contemporary artists and youthful energy. But Guy's audience remains loyal. His show represents elegance, tradition, continuity with America's past. The Roosevelt Grill closes in 1959. But Guy moves seamlessly to the Waldorf Astoria's Grand Ballroom. The new venue is even more luxurious, befitting his status as New Year's royalty. The broadcasts continue their gentle magic, bridging generations and geographies with music that speaks to something eternal in human experience. The influence of Guy Lombardo's broadcasts extends far beyond entertainment into the realm of social psychology and national identity. During the Great Depression, his music provides emotional sanctuary for millions of Americans facing economic hardship. The elegant atmosphere of his broadcasts offers escape from breadlines and unemployment offices, allowing listeners to imagine themselves dancing in grand ballrooms rather than struggling to survive. The Roosevelt Hotel becomes more than just a venue. It transforms into a symbol of American resilience and optimism. The building itself embodies the era's architectural grandeur, with Art Deco details and luxurious appointments that speak to national aspirations despite economic reality. When radio waves carry the sounds of laughter and music from this elegant space, they transport listeners to a world where prosperity and happiness remain possible. Guy's personal story resonates with immigrant communities across America. Born Gaetano Alberto Lombardo to Italian parents in Canada, he represents the promise of North American opportunity. His success validates the dreams of millions of newcomers seeking better lives in the New World. Letters to the band often mention how his music reminds listeners of their own family gatherings and cultural traditions. The musical arrangements themselves become objects of study and imitation. Conservatory students analyze Guy's unique approach to harmony and rhythm, trying to understand how he creates such emotional impact with relatively simple musical elements. His saxophone section's exaggerated vibrato becomes a signature sound that influences popular music for decades. The way his brass section clips phrases creates rhythmic patterns that other band leaders attempt to copy. International recognition follows domestic success. European orchestras begin performing Guy Lombardo arrangements, adapting American New Year's traditions to their own cultural contexts. British band leaders study his radio techniques, recognizing how he uses microphone placement and acoustic dynamics to create intimacy with listeners. The sweetest music this side of heaven becomes a global brand representing American musical sophistication. The social dynamics within the band reflect broader American values about family, loyalty, and democratic cooperation. Despite Guy's position as leader, decision-making often involves consultation with his brothers and longtime members. This collaborative approach creates musical chemistry that audiences sense even through radio waves. Musicians who join the Royal Canadians often stay for decades, creating stability that contrasts sharply with the rapid personnel changes in other orchestras. The business model that Guy develops for his broadcasts establishes templates that the entertainment industry follows for generations. Corporate sponsorship, audience measurement, and market research all evolve in response to the success of his radio shows. Advertisers learn to associate their products with the positive emotions that Guy's music generates, creating advertising psychology that persists into the television and digital eras. The cultural impact on American courtship and marriage customs proves profound and lasting. Couples begin associating Guy's music with romantic milestone moments in their relationships. Marriage proposals often occur during broadcasts of Auld Lang Syne, creating personal memories that intertwine with national traditions. Dance patterns that couples learn to Guy's music influence how they move together throughout their lives. Regional radio stations across America develop their own New Year's programming to complement Guy's national broadcasts. Local orchestras perform before and after the network feed, creating hybrid celebrations that blend national and community elements. Small-town band leaders study Guy's techniques and adapt them to regional tastes, spreading his influence throughout the country. The technological requirements for broadcasting Guy's shows drive innovations in radio engineering and acoustic design. The Roosevelt Hotel's ballroom undergoes modifications to optimize sound quality for transmission. Microphone placement becomes an art form as engineers learn to capture both musical performance and ambient atmosphere. These technical advances influence recording industry practices and concert hall design. Military service during World War II creates unexpected connections between Guy's music and American patriotism. Soldiers stationed overseas request recordings of his broadcasts to maintain connection with home. The Armed Forces Radio Network regularly features Guy Lombardo programs as morale-building content. When servicemen return after the war, they associate his music with both longing for home and celebration of survival. The economic impact of Guy's success extends throughout the entertainment industry. Musicians' union contracts improve as demand for skilled performers increases. Music publishers benefit from increased sales of sheet music featured in his broadcasts. The Roosevelt Hotel, and later the Waldorf Astoria, gain international recognition that attracts tourists and business conferences year-round. Educational institutions begin incorporating Guy's music into curricula as example of American popular culture. Music theory courses analyze his arrangements to understand how popular music achieves emotional impact. Social studies classes use his broadcasts to explore topics including immigration, cultural assimilation, and mass media's role in creating national unity. The relationship between Guy's music and American religious traditions develops in unexpected ways. Many churches begin using his arrangements for hymns and Christmas carols, recognizing that his approach makes sacred music more accessible to contemporary audiences. The gentle, reverent quality of his ballad interpretations translates well to spiritual contexts. Fashion and style trends emerge from the visual elements of Guy's television broadcasts. The elegant evening wear worn by dancers in the ballroom influences formal wear sales across America. Hairstyles and jewelry choices seen on the broadcasts become models for special occasion dressing. The overall aesthetic creates aspirational images that shape consumer behavior. International diplomacy benefits from Guy's cultural ambassadorship. State dinners and embassy receptions often feature his music as representation of sophisticated American culture. Foreign dignitaries learn to associate his sound with American hospitality and refinement. Cultural exchange programs include his recordings as examples of American musical achievement. The psychological research conducted during this era explores how Guy's music affects listener emotions and behavior. Studies examine the relationship between musical tempo, harmony, and mood regulation. Researchers investigate how familiar melodies trigger memory and emotional response. This work establishes foundations for music therapy and commercial applications of background music. Guy's influence on American Christmas traditions parallels his New Year's impact. His arrangements of holiday classics become standard versions that radio stations play throughout December. The gentle, family-friendly approach to Christmas music helps establish the holiday's modern American character as celebration focused on warmth, togetherness, and nostalgic sentiment. Labor relations within the music industry evolve partly in response to Guy's business practices. His fair treatment of musicians and stable employment creates models for other band leaders to follow. Union contracts begin incorporating provisions for steady work and reasonable touring schedules based on standards that Guy establishes with his organization. The architecture of entertainment venues changes to accommodate the acoustic requirements of broadcast quality performances. New ballrooms and concert halls incorporate design elements that optimize both live performance and radio transmission. These architectural innovations influence public building design throughout the mid-20th century. Child development specialists note how Guy's music affects family dynamics and children's musical education. Parents use his broadcasts to introduce children to musical appreciation and social dancing. The intergenerational appeal of his music creates family bonding opportunities that strengthen traditional values during periods of rapid social change. As television begins competing with radio for audiences, Guy's adaptation strategies provide models for other performers making the transition between media. His understanding of visual presentation, camera angles, and television pacing influences how musicians approach the new medium. The success of his television broadcasts demonstrates that established radio performers can successfully transition to visual media. When Guy Lombardo conducts Auld Lang Syne at the stroke of midnight, he's not just playing a song, he's creating a moment of national communion, a shared emotional experience that transcends differences of politics, religion, race, and class. For those few minutes, America becomes one large family, singing together about friendship and the passage of time. This is the secret power of Guy Lombardo's New Year's tradition. It transforms individual loneliness into collective celebration, private anxiety about the future into shared hope, personal memory into national mythology. Each year, as his music drifts across the continent, millions of Americans remember who they are and what they share together. But even as Guy creates this beautiful tradition, Forces are gathering that will reshape American celebration once again. Youth culture is rising, television is expanding, and soon a young man from Philadelphia will challenge the supremacy of sweet music with something called rock and roll. November 30th, 1929. In Mount Vernon, New York, a baby cries his first breath. His name is Richard Wagstaff Clark, and someday he will challenge the supremacy of sweet music with something revolutionary called rock and roll. But that revolution is still decades away. Tonight, as baby Dick sleeps in his crib, Guy Lombardo's orchestra plays Auld Lang Syne for the first time on national radio, creating a tradition that will seem unbreakable. Growing up, Dick Clark is fascinated by radio. In his father's broadcasting station, he watches engineers adjust dials and announcers read copy into microphones. The magic of voices traveling through the air captures his imagination. Even as a teenager, he fills in for weathermen and announcers, developing the smooth, friendly voice that will someday reach millions. By the 1950s, Guy Lombardo owns New Year's Eve completely. His broadcasts draw massive audiences. His sweetest music this side of heaven defines sophisticated celebration. But something is stirring in American culture that will change everything. Young people are listening to different music, developing different tastes, wanting different kinds of fun. In Philadelphia, a local television show called Bandstand features teenagers dancing to popular records. The host is Bob Horn, a radio DJ who understands that young people want to see their peers, not just listen to distant orchestras. When Horn leaves the show in 1956, a 26-year-old local announcer named Dick Clark takes over. Clark immediately recognizes the show's potential. These aren't professional dancers or adult couples in evening wear. These are regular teenagers wearing school clothes, dancing to songs they hear on the radio. They represent something completely new in American entertainment: authentic youth culture. On August 5th, 1957, American Bandstand goes national on ABC. 67 affiliate stations broadcast the show, reaching millions of teenagers who see themselves reflected on television for the first time. The clean-cut host with the boyish smile introduces acts ranging from Jerry Lee Lewis to Buddy Holly, from the Everly Brothers to Chuck Berry. But Clark's genius extends beyond music promotion. He understands that television can create shared cultural experiences more powerful than radio ever could. When teenagers in California watch the same show as teenagers in Maine, they begin developing common references, shared dances, unified generational identity. The music itself tells a story of cultural revolution. Rock and roll emerges from rhythm and blues, country, and gospel, music rooted in African American and working-class white experiences. This isn't the refined entertainment of hotel ballrooms. It's raw, emotional, rebellious, alive with sexuality and youth energy that previous generations find threatening. Parents and cultural authorities denounce rock and roll as corrupting, dangerous, un-American. Some claim jazz puts sin in syncopation. Religious leaders condemn dancing as immoral. Politicians investigate record companies for promoting juvenile delinquency. But teenagers embrace the music as their own, creating a generational divide that will reshape American society. By the late 1960s, this generational divide extends to New Year's Eve. Young people watching Guy Lombardo's broadcasts see their grandparents' idea of celebration: formal, restrained, old-fashioned. They want something that reflects their own values and energy. The seeds of revolution are planted. Dick Clark recognizes this opportunity earlier than most. In the late 1960s, he begins thinking about creating a New Year's Eve special that would appeal to younger audiences. Guy Lombardo's shows feature big band music and formal ballroom dancing. Clark envisions contemporary artists, rock and roll energy, casual atmosphere that matches how young people actually celebrate. The breakthrough comes in 1972. NBC approaches Clark about producing a New Year's special to compete with Guy Lombardo's dominance on CBS. Clark sees his chance to revolutionize American New Year's celebration. He conceives New Year's Rockin' Eve as direct challenge to Lombardo's formal tradition. The first show, on December 31st, 1972, represents cultural earthquake. Instead of ballroom orchestras, the program features Three Dog Night, Helen Reddy, and Billy Preston. Instead of elegant hotel ballrooms, performances come from the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. Instead of formal evening wear, performers and audiences dress casually. Most significantly, the show targets young people who feel excluded from traditional New Year's celebrations. Clark understands that his audience wants to see artists they listen to regularly, not orchestras playing music their parents prefer. The show's very name, New Year's Rockin' Eve, declares its generational allegiances. The program moves to ABC in 1974, with Clark assuming hosting duties. The timing is perfect. Guy Lombardo's audience is aging, while baby boomers are entering their prime celebration years. Clark positions his show as hipper, more contemporary, more representative of how America actually lives. Clark's hosting style contrasts dramatically with Lombardo's formal elegance. Where Guy conducts in tailcoat and white tie, Dick wears casual suits and friendly smiles. Where Guy maintains professional distance, Dick chats conversationally with audiences. Where Guy represents refinement, Dick embodies accessibility. The cultural impact extends beyond entertainment. New Year's Rockin' Eve reflects broader social changes transforming America in the 1970s. Formal hierarchies are breaking down, youth culture is gaining power, traditional authorities are being questioned. Clark's casual democratic approach matches the era's anti-establishment mood. The show's success creates new traditions that will outlast both hosts. The Times Square location becomes central to the broadcast, with Clark providing live coverage from the actual ball drop. This innovation makes television audiences feel like participants rather than distant observers. They're not watching a celebration, they're part of it. Clark develops signature phrases and rituals that become part of American culture. His youthful appearance earns him the nickname America's Oldest Teenager. His sign-off, "For now, Dick Clark, so long," becomes as familiar as Lombardo's Auld Lang Syne. His countdown to midnight creates shared national moment of anticipation. The generational transition isn't immediate or complete. Throughout the 1970s, both shows coexist, serving different audiences with different cultural values. Families often split their viewing, with grandparents preferring Lombardo and teenagers choosing Clark. This division reflects larger social tensions about tradition versus change. Musical selection reveals these cultural differences clearly. Lombardo features standards, waltzes, and familiar melodies that appeal across generations. Clark showcases contemporary hits, rock anthems, and artists that excite young audiences but mystify older viewers. Each host curates celebration that reflects his audience's values and aspirations. The technological landscape also favors Clark's approach. Television is becoming more visual, more immediate, more oriented toward spectacle. Lombardo's radio-era intimacy seems old-fashioned compared to Clark's television-native energy. Younger viewers want to see performers, not just hear them. When Guy Lombardo dies in November 1977, an era ends. His final New Year's broadcast the previous year concluded nearly 50 years of tradition. Clark's show immediately becomes the dominant New Year's program, inheriting the cultural authority that Lombardo had built over decades. But Clark's triumph represents more than succession. It marks fundamental transformation in American celebration. New Year's Eve becomes younger, more casual, more oriented toward entertainment than elegance. The change reflects broader cultural shifts that prioritize youth over age, informality over formality, innovation over tradition. Clark's version of Auld Lang Syne maintains the song's central role, but transforms its presentation. Instead of orchestral arrangement emphasizing melody and sentiment, rock versions emphasize rhythm and energy. The words remain the same, but the feeling changes completely. The success of New Year's Rockin' Eve influences how Americans celebrate in their own homes. Formal dinner parties give way to casual gatherings. Champagne and caviar compete with beer and pizza. Evening gowns and tuxedos lose ground to jeans and sweaters. Celebration becomes more democratic, accessible, and youth-oriented. Clark's longevity proves remarkable. He hosts the show for over 30 years, becoming as associated with New Year's Eve as Lombardo ever was. His apparent agelessness, he continues looking boyish well into his 70s, seems to symbolize America's own obsession with youth and renewal. The show evolves with changing musical tastes, featuring disco in the 1970s, new wave in the 1980s, grunge in the 1990s, and hip-hop in the 2000s. This adaptability ensures continued relevance across multiple generational transitions. Each year brings new artists and sounds while maintaining familiar format and location. Clark's stroke in 2004 creates succession crisis similar to Lombardo's death. Ryan Seacrest gradually assumes hosting duties, while Clark makes limited appearances until his death in 2012. The transition maintains the show's youth orientation while acknowledging its established traditions. The broader cultural impact of Clark's revolution extends far beyond New Year's Eve. His success demonstrates television's power to reshape social traditions, youth culture's growing influence over mainstream entertainment, and generational change's ability to transform seemingly permanent institutions. The transformation of American New Year's celebrations reflects broader cultural shifts that reshape every aspect of society during the 1960s and 1970s. Civil rights movements, anti-war protests, feminist activism, and generational rebellion create social upheaval that extends into entertainment and celebration. Dick Clark's rise represents more than changing musical tastes. It embodies a fundamental reimagining of American cultural authority. The technological landscape that enables Clark's success develops throughout the 1950s and 1960s. Television ownership expands rapidly, reaching nearly every American household by the early 1970s. Color broadcasting adds visual appeal that radio could never provide. Satellite technology enables coast-to-coast transmission that makes truly national programming possible. These technological advances create opportunities for entertainment formats that would have been impossible in Guy Lombardo's radio era. The social psychology underlying Clark's appeal reflects changing American attitudes toward youth, authority, and authenticity. Parents who grew up during the Depression and World War II often defer to traditional institutions and established customs. Their children, born into post-war prosperity, feel less constrained by formal protocols and social hierarchies. Clark's casual, approachable style resonates with audiences seeking alternatives to institutional formality. American Bandstand creates cultural phenomena that extend far beyond music into fashion, language, and social behavior. The Philadelphia teenagers who appear on the show become inadvertent style influences, with their clothing choices and dance moves copied by peers across the country. The show's integrated format, featuring both black and white performers and audience members, provides visual representation of changing racial attitudes during the civil rights era. The payola scandals of the late 1950s affect how Clark develops his career and business practices. Unlike some disc jockeys who accept bribes for playing specific records, Clark maintains careful distance from promotional corruption. This ethical stance, combined with his clean-cut image, positions him as a trustworthy figure during a period when many entertainment industry professionals face scandal and prosecution. Regional differences in musical taste become apparent as Clark's show gains national distribution. Southern audiences prefer country and rockabilly influences, while urban markets favor rhythm and blues and soul music. Western states embrace surf rock and folk music revival. Clark's programming decisions must balance these diverse preferences while maintaining national appeal. The business model that Clark creates for New Year's Rockin' Eve establishes templates for television event programming that influence the industry for decades. Corporate sponsorship becomes more sophisticated, with advertisers paying premium rates for association with special events. Merchandising opportunities expand as the show's brand recognition grows. International distribution rights add revenue streams that didn't exist during radio era. Cultural criticism of Clark's approach emerges from both conservative and liberal perspectives. Traditional commentators argue that rock and roll corrupts youth morals and undermines family values. Progressive critics contend that Clark's sanitized presentation of rebellious music neutralizes its authentic social and political content. Clark navigates these competing criticisms by maintaining focus on entertainment rather than cultural commentary. The impact of Clark's television presence on fashion and personal style extends throughout American society. His clean-cut appearance, conservative suits, and friendly demeanor create template for television hosting that influences performers across all genres. The contrast between his professional presentation and the sometimes wild energy of musical guests creates dynamic tension that keeps audiences engaged. International influence grows as American popular music and television programming gain global distribution. Clark's shows reach audiences in Canada, Latin America, and Europe, spreading American youth culture worldwide. Foreign broadcasters develop their own versions of countdown programming, adapting American formats to local tastes and traditions. The role of women in Clark's broadcasts evolves gradually, reflecting changing social attitudes about gender roles and female participation in entertainment. Early shows feature women primarily as dancers or backup singers, but later programming includes female solo artists and television personalities. This evolution mirrors broader women's liberation movements occurring throughout American society. Educational institutions begin studying Clark's programs as examples of mass media's influence on youth culture and social change. Communication schools analyze his hosting techniques and audience engagement strategies. Sociology departments explore how television programming shapes cultural attitudes and consumer behavior. Music education programs examine how popular media affects musical taste development among young people. The competitive pressure from other television networks leads to innovation in countdown programming format and content. NBC develops alternative New Year's programming featuring different musical genres and celebrity hosts. Cable networks experiment with specialized content targeting specific demographic groups. This competition drives improvements in production values and performer quality. Religious communities respond to rock and roll's cultural influence in various ways, with some embracing contemporary music for worship, while others resist secular musical influences. Clarke's respectful treatment of different musical traditions helps bridge gaps between religious and secular entertainment. His programs avoid controversial content that might alienate family audiences, while maintaining appeal for younger viewers. The economic impact of Clarke's success extends throughout the entertainment industry ecosystem. Recording companies increase promotion budgets for television appearances. Concert venues book artists based on television popularity rather than just radio play. Musical instrument sales rise as young people aspire to emulate performers they see on television. Child development research explores how television programming affects learning, social development, and cultural identity formation among young viewers. Studies examine relationships between music preference, peer group membership, and individual personality development. This research influences both programming decisions and parental guidance practices. The technological requirements for producing high-quality television broadcasts drive innovations in cameras, lighting, sound recording, and signal transmission. Clarke's production team becomes known for technical excellence that enhances both live and recorded performances. These technical advances influence concert production, recording studio design, and live event management throughout the entertainment industry. International touring by American artists increases as television exposure creates global demand for live performances. Clarke's shows serve as launching pads for international careers that spread American musical influence worldwide. This cultural diplomacy enhances America's soft power influence during Cold War period. Urban planning and architecture respond to changing entertainment preferences as cities develop facilities designed for rock concerts and youth-oriented events. Traditional concert halls supplement classical programming with popular music performances. New venue designs accommodate both acoustic requirements and visual spectacle demanded by television-era audiences. The relationship between Clarke's programming and advertising industry evolution reflects changing marketing approaches that target generational rather than just geographic demographics. Advertisers learn to associate products with youth culture values rather than traditional family hierarchies. This shift influences consumer product development, marketing strategies, and retail approaches. Labor relations in entertainment industry adapt to television production requirements that differ significantly from radio or live performance standards. Musicians' unions negotiate contracts that account for television residuals, rehearsal requirements, and promotional appearances. These agreements establish precedents for entertainment industry employment throughout the television era. The impact of Clarke's longevity becomes apparent as multiple generations grow up watching his broadcasts. Parents who watched American Bandstand as teenagers share New Year's countdown experiences with their own children. This intergenerational continuity creates family traditions that bridge different musical eras and cultural periods. By challenging Guy Lombardo's monopoly on New Year's Eve, Dick Clarke opened celebration to new voices, new sounds, new ways of marking time's passage. His revolution made New Year's Eve younger, louder, more inclusive, and ultimately more representative of America's democratic values. Yet, even as Clark's vision triumphs, new challenges await. Cable television, internet streaming, and social media will fragment audiences in ways that neither Lombardo nor Clark could have imagined, creating opportunities for even more radical transformation of how Americans celebrate together. December 31st, 1999. The world holds its breath. As midnight approaches across time zones, computers might crash, power grids might fail, and civilization itself might collapse under the weight of the Y2K bug. But in Times Square, the ball still drops. The tradition continues, bridging humanity's oldest fears about time's passage with its newest anxieties about technology. By the millennium's end, New Year's Eve has become something unimaginable to the Pilgrims who first set foot on frozen Massachusetts shores. What began as scattered colonial celebrations has evolved into a global phenomenon, broadcast to over 1 billion viewers worldwide. The crystal ball in Times Square has become Earth's shared countdown clock, marking midnight for a planet that never truly sleeps. The technological revolution reshaping American society affects how people celebrate as profoundly as Prohibition once did. Cable television fragments the audience that Guy Lombardo and Dick Clark once united. MTV creates New Year's Eve Live, targeting even younger viewers with alternative rock and hip-hop. Multiple networks compete for countdown supremacy, each promising better celebrity performances and more spectacular productions. Internet streaming adds another dimension to the transformation. Suddenly, Americans can choose from dozens of New Year's broadcasts from around the world. London's fireworks over the Thames, Sydney's Harbour Bridge celebration, Rio's beach party. Global options multiply endlessly. The Times Square monopoly that once seemed unbreakable faces unprecedented competition. Social media changes celebration from passive viewing to active participation. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok enable real-time sharing of New Year's moments from every corner of America. Families document their parties, friends coordinate gatherings, strangers connect over shared countdown experiences. The intimacy of Guy Lombardo's radio broadcasts returns in digital form. Yet the more technology advances, the more people crave authentic human connection. Times Square attendance grows larger each year, despite hours of standing in cold without bathroom access. Over 1 million people now gather in person, while many more watch from nearby buildings and streets. The physical experience of sharing countdown with strangers becomes more precious as digital life dominates daily existence. The demographics of celebration continue evolving. What once was primarily white, middle-class, and Christian becomes increasingly diverse. Latino families bring posadas traditions. Asian communities contribute lunar calendar customs. Muslim Americans adapt celebrations to fit religious requirements. New Year's Eve becomes more inclusive while maintaining its core American character. Immigration patterns directly influence how the holiday develops. Cities with large immigrant populations create fusion celebrations, combining traditional American countdown with cultural traditions from around the world. Los Angeles features mariachi bands alongside rock concerts. New York includes Bollywood dancers and K-pop performances. Chicago celebrates with Polish polkas and Mexican conjunto music. The economic scale of modern New Year's celebration dwarfs anything previous generations could imagine. Americans spend over $1 billion annually on New Year's festivities. Restaurants, hotels, decorations, party supplies, clothing, transportation. Entire industries depend on this single night's celebration. The event becomes so economically important that cities compete to host major broadcasts and attract tourist dollars. Corporate sponsorship transforms the visual landscape of celebration. The Times Square Ball itself becomes an advertising vehicle, covered with corporate logos and brand messages. Waterford Crystal provides the triangle panels. Philips supplies LED lighting. Official sponsors plaster their names across every surface. What once was simple community gathering becomes massive commercial enterprise. Television production values reach unprecedented sophistication. Multiple camera angles capture every moment of ball descent. Celebrities perform on elaborate stages built specifically for the broadcast. Special effects create virtual environments that blend seamlessly with live action. The technical complexity rivals Olympic ceremonies or presidential inaugurations. Yet technology also enables more intimate celebrations. Streaming services offer personalized countdown experiences. Video calling connects families separated by distance. Social media platforms create virtual parties for people celebrating alone. The digital revolution that fragments mass audiences also provides new forms of connection for isolated individuals. Climate change affects outdoor celebrations in unexpected ways. Warmer winters mean fewer years with snow in Times Square, changing the visual aesthetic that defined classic broadcasts. Extreme weather events force contingency planning for massive outdoor gatherings. Environmental consciousness influences everything from decorations to transportation to waste management. The security apparatus surrounding Times Square grows ever more elaborate. After 9/11, metal detectors and bag searches become standard. Concrete barriers block vehicle access. Sharpshooters position themselves on surrounding rooftops. Police presence reaches military levels. The open, accessible celebration of earlier eras gives way to fortress-like security that reflects America's changed relationship with public safety. International influence expands as American-style countdown celebrations spread worldwide. Cities across the globe adopt ball drop traditions, Times Square-style gatherings, and midnight fireworks displays. American pop culture exports create common celebration vocabulary that transcends national boundaries. The Times Square model becomes template for urban New Year's events everywhere. Streaming technology enables participation from previously unimaginable locations. Military personnel deployed overseas watch live broadcasts on smartphones and tablets. Astronauts on the International Space Station celebrate multiple New Years as they orbit Earth. Scientific researchers in Antarctica gather around satellite feeds to maintain connection with home. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 creates the most dramatic transformation since World War II blackouts. For the first time in over 70 years, Times Square empties of crowds. Virtual celebrations replace physical gatherings. Drive-in viewing parties provide socially distanced alternatives. The pandemic proves that even the most established traditions can adapt to extraordinary circumstances. Post-pandemic celebrations blend physical and digital elements in new ways. QR codes connect attendees to additional content and experiences. Augmented reality apps overlay digital effects on live events. Hybrid viewing parties combine in-person and virtual attendees. Technology that separated people during lockdown now enhances their shared experiences. Generational changes continue influencing how Americans celebrate. Millennials and Generation Z bring different expectations about inclusivity, environmental consciousness, and social justice. New Year's broadcasts increasingly feature diverse performers and address contemporary social issues. The apolitical entertainment model of earlier eras gives way to programming that reflects current cultural conversations. The role of countdown itself evolves as time becomes more fluid in digital age. Smartphones provide multiple clocks showing different time zones simultaneously. Global communications make midnight seem less definitive when conversations with friends happen across continents. Yet the ritual of counting down final seconds retains its emotional power, perhaps because precision timing matters more in interconnected world. Youth culture continues reshaping celebration formats. TikTok dances replace traditional ballroom styles. Spotify playlists substitute for live orchestras. Food trucks compete with five-star restaurants. The formality that once defined sophisticated celebration gives way to casual authenticity that younger generations prefer. Regional variations multiply as local media markets create their own countdown traditions. Nashville features country music stars. Miami showcases Latin performers. Seattle highlights grunge and alternative rock. The national unity that radio and early television created fragments into dozens of specialized celebration communities. Religious and cultural sensitivities influence programming decisions in ways previous generations rarely considered. Prayer moments accommodate diverse faiths. Performance selections avoid potentially offensive content. And celebrity choices reflect careful demographic calculations. The simple entertainment of earlier eras becomes complex cultural negotiation. Economic inequality affects celebration participation as costs rise far beyond inflation rates. Premium viewing locations, exclusive parties, and luxury experiences price out middle-class families who once formed celebration's core audience. Gentrification displaces longtime communities from traditional celebration neighborhoods. The democratic accessibility that defined American New Year's faces challenges from economic stratification. Environmental consciousness influences every aspect of modern celebration. Confetti becomes biodegradable. LED lighting reduces power consumption. Public transportation receives priority over private vehicles. Climate activism integrates with party planning as younger generations demand sustainable festivities. The carefree consumption of earlier eras seems irresponsible in age of environmental crisis. Global time zone considerations become more complex as celebration goes worldwide. Broadcast schedules accommodate multiple midnight moments across continents. Programming stretches over 24 hours to cover Earth's rotation. The simple countdown that once marked single moment in single place becomes marathon coverage of planetary celebration. Yet beneath all technological innovation and cultural change, fundamental human needs remain constant. People still gather to mark time's passage, to hope for better futures, to connect with community. Whether through radio waves, television broadcasts, internet streams, or social media posts, Americans continue seeking shared experience that transcends individual loneliness. The crystal ball still drops in Times Square, carrying forward traditions that stretch back to colonial Dutch calling customs, Puritan rejection of celebration, plantation ball gowns, and Prohibition speakeasies. Each generation adapts celebration to reflect its values, while maintaining connection to America's complex past. As midnight approaches once again, Americans prepare for another year of possibility. They've learned from Pilgrims that celebration isn't guaranteed. From prohibitionists that joy finds ways to survive. From Guy Lombardo that music connects souls across vast distances. From Dick Clark that youth deserves its voice. And from the digital age that technology serves humanity rather than replacing it. The emergence of alternative celebration formats reflects American society's increasing diversity and fragmentation. Gaming communities create virtual New Year's parties in online worlds, complete with digital fireworks and avatar celebrations. Sports bars organize countdown parties centered around bowl games and hockey matches. Art galleries host avant-garde performances that reimagine temporal transition as artistic expression. These specialized celebrations serve communities that feel disconnected from mainstream Times Square programming. The globalization of American New Year's traditions creates complex cultural exchanges that reshape celebration practices worldwide. McDonald's restaurants in Asia serve special New Year's menu items inspired by American comfort foods. Shopping malls in Europe create miniature Times Square recreations, complete with countdown clocks and ball drops. Latin American countries blend traditional midnight grape-eating customs with American-style countdown parties. Psychological research into countdown experiences reveals how anticipation and shared timing affect human emotional regulation and social bonding. Studies show that synchronized activities like countdown participation trigger neurological responses similar to religious experiences or tribal rituals. This scientific understanding influences event planning, therapeutic applications, and marketing strategies across multiple industries. The role of celebrity culture in modern New Year's broadcasts becomes increasingly complex as fame itself fragments into multiple platforms and audience segments. Traditional movie stars compete with YouTube personalities, TikTok influencers, and reality television figures for countdown hosting opportunities. The definition of celebrity expands to include social media metrics rather than just traditional entertainment achievements. Urban development patterns change as cities compete to create signature New Year's destinations that attract tourist revenue and media attention. Las Vegas invests billions in spectacular fireworks displays and celebrity performances. Miami develops beach party alternatives to cold weather celebrations. Nashville creates country music-themed countdown events that appeal to specific demographic segments. The environmental impact of modern celebrations becomes focus of sustainability movements that influence everything from confetti composition to transportation planning. Cities implement recycling programs specifically for post-celebration cleanup. Event organizers source decorations from renewable materials. Carbon offset programs allow environmentally conscious participants to neutralize their celebration footprints. Mental health considerations gain prominence as psychologists recognize how New Year's pressure affects anxiety, depression, and social isolation among vulnerable populations. Suicide prevention hotlines prepare for increased call volume during holiday periods. Community organizations develop inclusive celebration options for people experiencing loneliness or financial hardship. The economics of celebration become increasingly stratified as luxury experiences price out middle-class families, while discount alternatives multiply for budget-conscious consumers. Premium Times Square viewing packages cost thousands of dollars, while streaming services offer free countdown programming. This economic segmentation reflects broader inequality trends affecting American society. Immigration patterns continue influencing how different communities adapt New Year's traditions to their cultural backgrounds. Ethiopian Americans celebrate both the Gregorian calendar New Year and their traditional Enkutatah holiday. Chinese Americans blend Lunar New Year customs with January countdown celebrations. These cultural fusion practices enrich American celebration diversity while maintaining distinct ethnic identities. The pharmaceutical and alcohol industries adapt marketing strategies to changing celebration habits and health consciousness trends. Non-alcoholic champagne alternatives target health-focused consumers and designated drivers. Pharmaceutical companies promote hangover prevention products through social media campaigns. These commercial adaptations reflect evolving American attitudes toward responsible celebration. Digital privacy concerns affect how people share celebration experiences online, with some choosing to document festivities privately rather than broadcasting to social media networks. Platform policies about user-generated content influence what celebration images and videos can be shared publicly. These privacy considerations reshape how Americans think about public versus private celebration spaces. The impact of climate change on outdoor celebration planning becomes increasingly apparent as extreme weather events disrupt traditional festivities. Unprecedented winter warming forces contingency planning for snow-dependent decorations and activities. Storm systems require flexible scheduling for outdoor countdown events. These climate pressures accelerate adoption of indoor and virtual celebration alternatives. International time zone coordination becomes more complex as global communication networks enable real-time celebration sharing across continents. Streaming services schedule programming to accommodate multiple midnight moments as Earth rotates. Social media platforms develop features that help users coordinate celebration timing with friends and family in different time zones. The role of artificial intelligence in celebration planning and content creation begins influencing how events are organized and presented. AI algorithms recommend personalized countdown programming based on individual viewing histories and preference patterns. Automated content generation creates customized celebration videos and social media posts. These technological capabilities enhance celebration personalization while raising questions about authentic human experience. Educational institutions develop new academic approaches to studying celebration culture as a legitimate field of scholarly research. Anthropology departments explore how ritual practices adapt to technological change. Business schools analyze event management and marketing strategies. Media studies programs examine how broadcasting innovations affect cultural tradition formation. The impact of remote work culture on celebration practices becomes apparent as distributed teams organize virtual New Year's parties that connect colleagues across geographic boundaries. Corporate celebration budgets shift from physical venues to digital platforms and shipped care packages. These workplace adaptations influence how professional relationships are maintained during dispersed employment arrangements. Generational differences in celebration preferences become more pronounced as digital natives embrace interactive and customizable experiences, while older Americans prefer traditional broadcast formats. Generation Z expects real-time engagement opportunities through polls, comments, and social media integration. Baby boomers value familiar music and predictable programming schedules. Event organizers must accommodate these divergent expectations simultaneously. The therapeutic applications of celebration rituals gain recognition as healthcare providers understand how shared positive experiences affect physical and mental health outcomes. Hospitals organize countdown celebrations for patients unable to participate in outside festivities. Rehabilitation centers use New Year's goal setting as therapeutic tool for recovery motivation. These medical applications expand understanding of celebration's role in human well-being. The impact of quantum physics research on time perception influences philosophical discussions about countdown experiences and temporal consciousness. Scientific discoveries about time's relativity affect how people conceptualize New Year's transition moments. These theoretical explorations find expression in art installations and experimental celebration formats that challenge conventional timing assumptions. Space exploration programs create new challenges for celebration timing as human habitation extends beyond Earth's time zone system. International Space Station crew members experience multiple New Years as they orbit the planet. Mars mission planning includes protocols for maintaining Earth-connected celebrations during interplanetary travel. These extraterrestrial considerations expand human celebration beyond terrestrial boundaries. The continuing evolution of American New Year's traditions reflects the nation's ongoing cultural development and adaptation to changing circumstances. From colonial Dutch calling customs to digital streaming celebrations, each generation has modified inherited practices to reflect contemporary values and capabilities. The secret history of New Year's Eve in America reveals a story larger than any single tradition or celebration. It's the story of how people create meaning together, how cultures adapt while preserving essential values, and how hope persists through every form of darkness. In Times Square's bright lights and around kitchen tables, in live broadcasts and video calls, Americans continue writing this story one midnight at a time. Please like and subscribe to hear more stories that reveal the hidden history shaping our world today.